What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This is actually the final video of our Pokedex series. Really quick, what we're going to be doing is, let me hop to our completed application. We are going to be implementing the functionality to hit that View More Info button and go over to our Pokemon Info Controller. And then we are going to be setting up this evolution chain here as well. So, and then also add in like a little bit of refactoring at the end, maybe, if we have time. So let's go ahead and start by configuring the functionality for this View More Info button. So let's hop into our Pokedex Controller. And if you go into our helper function section, that's where we have this dismiss info view functionality, right? And then we call on that in our delegate method here. So when that View More Info button gets pressed, this function gets executed. So let's hop back up there. And this is going to be pretty simple to implement. So this is our completion block for when that animation actually ends, right? So this is the animation, and then within this block here is what is the code that gets executed once the animation is complete. So what we're going to do is get our Pokemon and then send it over to our info controller. So we're going to say guard let Pokemon equal Pokemon else return, and that's referring to this Pokemon up here. So basically what it's saying is if we pass in a Pokemon to this function, then it's going to make sure that Pokemon has a value there, and it's going to store it in this constant here. And if it doesn't, so if we ever call this function and this is nil, once it gets to this line of code, it's going to stop executing the function there, so it won't go over to our info controller. So then all we have to say is let controller equal Pokemon info controller, controller.Pokemon equals Pokemon, and then navigation controller.push view controller, controller, and animated is true. So let's go ahead and run this, and then we're going to do a quick refactor because, nope, we have to say self, because you have to say self when you're inside of a closure, so it knows what you're referring to. So let's run this, and then we can actually do a little bit of a refactor here, but let's see if it's working first. So let's click on Bulbasaur, hit View More Info, and then it goes over to our Pokemon Info Controller nicely and presents us with Bulbasaur's information. So that's looking really good, guys. And we notice that if we just tap on our view here, that it doesn't do that, right? Because that was our handle dismissal function for when we tap our view, so right here. And you notice we pass in a nil value for that Pokemon so that when it hits this completion block, it just removes that view from our super view and it checks for that Pokemon, and since it doesn't exist, it stops execution at line 90 and returns out of this function, and we're good to go. It's not going to execute the rest of this code. But what I want to do, since we have this code in two places, we have that in our dismissal guy here, so let's just cut these 3 lines of code out, right? So what we're going to say is go to our helper functions, and we're going to say func show Pokemon info controller with Pokemon, and then do a Pokemon, make it of type Pokemon there. And we'll see why we're doing this in a second. And go ahead and paste all that code in there. So it's going to say the controller's Pokemon is equal to this Pokemon here, right? So now we can just call that function there. So we'll say self.show Pokemon info controller with that Pokemon. And then we can go down to our collection view did select item at, where we have that code. We have that code here as well, right? So let's go ahead and call this function. So we'll say self.show. Actually, we don't need to say self because we're not in a closure here, with Pokemon. And then all we need to do is say let Pokemon equal, cut this stuff out, and we can go ahead and delete that, and then just pass in that Pokemon guy there. So that's a nice little refactor there, where we factor out those couple lines of code and replace it with a function. What's going on? Okay, so just here you say let Poke, because we can't use these 2 Pokemon guys in the same statement or line of code. So let's go ahead and run this code and see if it works. And then we're going to get started with our stuff on our evolution chain, which is going to be pretty cool. Excuse me, I have to get a sip of coffee there. Okay, so let's go here. And that's working nicely. And then if we click on Charmander, that's also working nicely. So our refactor there was successful. So that's pretty cool, guys. Now that we've done that, and actually really quick, let's search for a Pokemon. So let's say Char. Do this. Oh, that's not working. So we need to implement that as well. Okay guys, after some quick debugging, I realized that for some reason when this search bar is showing that this button functionality does not work. So for whatever reason that is, it might be a problem with Xcode or Apple's like libraries and stuff, I don't really know. We just have to hide this search bar when we show this info view here. So what we're gonna do is we have that code written out in our search bar delegate search bar cancel button clicked function. So what we're going to do is just cut this code out because we're going to want to use it somewhere else. And let's hop back up to our configure search bar function. And we're going to add in this variable here called should show. And it's going to be a Boolean variable. Go ahead and paste your code in there. Cut out the first part, or what we originally had in the code. You can just hit Command X to do that and say if should show, and then paste all that original stuff in there, and then cut this stuff back out and say else, and then paste that back in there. So if we build our code, we're going to get some errors here. So let's add in this guy here, and when we are showing the search bar, should show is going to be true. And then down in our cancel button clicked function, we need to call this again. So we want to hide our search bar here, so we'll say configure search bar should show is false. And then when let's see, now hop down to your Pokedex cell delegate, and we want to hide that search bar when we show this guy here. So we are going to call that function again, say configure search bar should show is false. And now if we run this, it's going to work. But before we do that, we notice that while this is showing, we can still hit this search bar or this search button. So what we're going to do is say navigation item right bar button item is enabled equals false. So that means when we present our info view, that button will be disabled. So the user will not be able to press that. So it eliminates our possibility for any kind of errors happening in our application. But we do need to make sure that we re-enable that button when this view gets dismissed. So let's hop down to this guy here, and let's hop up to this dismiss info view guy. And what we're going to do is say above this Pokemon statement and below this remove from super view, we're going to say navigation or self dot navigation item dot right bar button item dot is enabled equals true. So let's go ahead, run this, test it out, and that should be everything we need to have for our searching functionality along with our view more info button. So we notice that it dismisses and that search button is no longer enabled. And when we exit out upon completion, that search button is enabled again. So let's search for Charizard and see. So that's working nicely, guys. So that's looking good. And then we go back over here and that is enabled again. The only thing is that when we present that info view for our Pokemon, it reloads our collection view data and exits search mode. But that's really not that big of a deal. So now that we've done that, we can finally start moving forward with setting up our evolution data or our evolution chain. So my apologies, that took a little bit long to figure out, guys, but that's programming, that's debugging. Stuff takes a while to figure out sometimes. So let's go ahead and jump into this evolution chain. So I explained it a little bit in my last video. Let's go back into our API. So this is what it looks like in Firebase. It's not, you guys don't have access to this, I don't think, but I'm doing it for display purposes because it's a lot easier to read. So this is what our evolution chain value looks like here. So it's an array and it has these elements inside of it, and these elements are dictionaries. So what we need to do to access this evolution chain is hop into our Pokemon class and create a variable for it. So we're going to say var evolution chain, and this is going to equal an array of dictionaries, which is of type string and any object. So this first guy here, these two brackets are represent the dictionary, and then placing that inside of brackets means it's an array of dictionaries of this type, right? So make that optional, and then we need to go ahead and grab that down here. So if you guys remember, this is where we parse through our dictionary and set all the values in our code. So we just created this evolution chain variable. Now we need to go through our dictionary and actually set that evolution chain variable. And this absolutely needs to be optional because not every single Pokemon has an evolution chain. So like if I go all the way down to this is Mew. Mew does not evolve into anything, so he has no evolution chain. So making this optional is important to understand, and why we do that, because it could be nil, or it could be this dictionary array of dictionaries, essentially. And that's what optional means, right? It means that it can either be of this type or it could be nil. So in the case of some Pokemon, it will be nil. So now let's go ahead and set that up. So we're going to say if let evolution chain equals dictionary evolution chain, because that's the key of our evolution chain, and then we're going to cast it as an array of dictionaries like this, any object self.evolution chain equals evolution chain. Okay, so that's setting our value there. So now all of our Pokemon that have this evolution chain, we can now go ahead and say Pokemon.evolution chain, and it will give us back this array of dictionaries. So let's go and see if that is coming up correctly. So like in, let's say our info view, let's go up to our did set method and just see if we can print this Pokemon's evolution chain out. Print Pokemon.evolution chain. Build that, see if we don't get any errors, and I think we're good. So let's go ahead and run our project and then see exactly what comes up when we present our info view and what we get back for the evolution chain. So we're getting back Bulbasaur's evolution chain here, right? And that's looking good. So ID is 2, and then it goes to Ivysaur, and then Venusaur is the next evolution, and his ID is 3. So if we go back to our data, we see that is getting us back exactly this. So that's looking good, guys. Now let's figure out how exactly we need to use that data to get the correct info over to our Pokemon info controller. So let's get started with that. So we're going to do something pretty interesting here. We're going to hop back into our Pokemon class, and we're going to create a custom structure for this evolution chain, because it's got a lot of its own properties. And like what we need to do is sort of loop through this array of dictionaries and get the ID back for each one of our Pokemon that this guy evolves into. So in order to do that, this is what we're going to do. So go below your Pokemon class, or we could do it above it. We're going to say struct evolution chain, and it's going to contain some variables. So we want to give it that evolution array, and that is going to be this guy here. And then we want to get some evolution IDs as well, which is going to be an ID, an integer array. So essentially what we're going to do, guys, is we are going to go through this array, get back the ID for each one of the Pokemon that we need for that evolution chain. Let me say equals here. And then in our Pokedex controller, we're going to access that function, and we're going to be able to get that array of IDs and use it to pull those Pokemon out of this array. So we're going to say, okay, in this case, right, Bulbasaur's evolution chain is ID 2 and ID 3 for Ivysaur and Venusaur. So then we're going to go into the Pokemon array, get those Pokemon using those IDs from their respective slots in that Pokemon array, and then pass them over to our view controller here to display their images. So let's go ahead and go back into our Pokemon class and do what we need to do with this custom struct that we're creating. And I'm going to go more into why we create this as a structure. So now let's say we're going to create an init function, and then we're going to initialize it with that evolution array, which is going to be of this dictionary, the array of dictionaries that we see here. I'm going to say self.evolution array equals evolution array. And now we're going to write a function here. So we're going to say func, and this is going to be set evolution IDs, and it's going to return an array of integers, okay? And I'll explain why. Let me just write this function out really quick. So I'm going to say var results equals, an array of integers. Then we're going to say evolution array dot for each, and hit enter on that completion block there. So actually, let me go back and make sure you guys get the right one. So it's going to be this one here, hit enter, and then go here and hit enter again. And here we can just say dictionary, because remember, this is an array of dictionaries, so each element is a dictionary, right? So now we are going to say if let id string equals dictionary id, as string. Then we're going to say guard let id equals int id string else return, and then results dot append id. So then after we are done with that, let me see, where do we want to return this guy? Yeah, let's go here, go outside of that, and then say return results. And how we're going to use that is we're going to go up here and say self dot evolution IDs equals set evolution IDs. Okay, so that's let's go ahead and build this and see if that works. Build succeeded, so that's looking good, guys. So essentially, guys, instead of writing out all this code to get our evolution IDs in our Pokemon class, we just created a custom structure for this evolution chain that kind of helps us just like extract some code to take some weight off this Pokemon class. And it's like similar to what we did with subclassing our info view, right? So we're going to see how this is used in a little bit. We initialize it with this evolution array, which is what we get here from our Pokemon. And then we need to get those evolution IDs so that we can get the correct Pokemon from our Pokemon array in our Pokedex class, in our Pokedex controller. So then what we do to do that is we create this function that loops through that evolution array and goes and gets those IDs. So these IDs right here are actually represented as strings. So that's why I call this let ID string equal this key value, the value for this key ID as a string, and then we convert it to an integer. We append it to this results array, and then we return that results array. So we can say self.evolutionIDs equals set evolution IDs. So I know that's a little complicated, but I thought it was the best way to get this done. So let's go and hop into our Pokedex controller and see exactly how we're going to use this, right? So let me hop into my completed code here really quickly. 1 second. Okay. So go into our did select item at function, which is right here. It should be in the same section you have for your delegate and data source. So what we're going to do is we are going to make it so that once we click on this Pokemon, then it instantiates that structure that we created and then fetches that evolution data. And we're doing it when we click on this Pokemon because we only need that evolution data once we click on it. We don't need to set it all up once we do our initial data pull, right? That would just take extra time for our app to configure and all this stuff to show, which would slow it down. And in this case, it's not that much slower, but if you guys were to build this project at scale or any other project at scale, it's better to do it this way, in my opinion, because it only gets that data for you when you need it. It doesn't fetch it unnecessarily. So let's go ahead and do what we got to do here. So we're going to say guard let evo chain equals poke.evolution chain else return. So we have this Pokemon up here that we are getting from our correct array, whether based on whether or not we're in search mode or not. Don't worry about this guy right now. We're gonna put this after all that, okay? So let's go ahead and now say let evolution chain equal this capital evolution chain. So this refers to the structure that we created. And now we're gonna pass in this evo chain here. So pass in that evo chain guy that we just created. And now we're gonna say guard let evo IDs equal evolution chain dot evolution IDs else return. So what we're doing now is we are getting back this evolution IDs guy that we created. And I don't think we need a guard statement for that. Let's see if we delete that, what happens. Yeah, so I think that's okay. Because we instantiated it and made it an empty array to start with. So now we're gonna say evo IDs dot for each and then ID. Let's create this new array called var Pokemon evo array, and it's going to equal an array of Pokemon. Then we are going to say Pokemon evo array dot append Pokemon ID -1. Okay, so let me explain what's going on here, but I'm going to do that after we are seeing what's in this Pokemon evolution array. So let me just go ahead and say Pokemon evo array dot for each Pokemon print Pokemon dot name. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if this stuff is working. I know it's a lot going on, guys, but I'm going to explain it. Don't worry. So we hit this, and that's looking good. So we get back the Pokemon that we need. That's part of this evolution array. So and we're going to send those two Pokemon over, and then populate these image views here. So exactly what is going on? So we created this Pokemon evolution array, and we are going to add the Pokemon that are part of the evolution chain into this array here. And this is where we create or get our Pokemon's evolution chain. That is just this guy right here. So it's just the raw data that we get back here, okay? So then what we do is we create this evolution chain, which is this structure that we created, this custom structure. And in order to initialize it, it asks us for an array of dictionaries there, which is what we use to create that evolution chain structure. And then we get the evolution IDs that we need from that evolution chain structure there. And then we loop through that array of evolution IDs. So in this case, it's just going to be 2 and 3. And then we populate this Pokemon evolution array up here using this our Pokemon array. So if you guys remember, we have this Pokemon array up here that contains all of these Pokemon. So we are able to I shouldn't have done that right there. Okay, so what we're able to do is go into that Pokemon array using those IDs, right? Because and we have to say -1 because Bulbasaur is at the 0 index, Ivysaur is at the 1 index, Venusaur is at the 2 index. So Ivysaur's ID is 2, but he's in the 1 index of that array. So we need to say ID -1 to get the correct Pokemon from our Pokemon array. So then it populates that Pokemon Evo array, and we can see that there when we are printing that stuff out. So now what we're going to do is actually send this Pokemon Evo array over and populate it with the correct data. So what we can actually do is go back into our Pokemon class and add a variable called Evo array, and it's just going to be an array of Pokemon. And we're going to make it optional. And we're not going to be setting this using our dictionary, right? We're just going to set this up. We're just going to set this variable once we get that stuff here. So now that we've appended the Pokemon to our Evo array, we can say poke.evolution.evoArray equals Pokemon Evo array. And so now when we pass that Pokemon to our show Pokemon or our info controller, let's go up here and we can say in our viewDidLoad method, let's go ahead and just say print or let's see, in our Pokemon did set method, we'll say Pokemon.evoArray.for each Pokemon print Pokemon.name, just to see if we're successfully passing that data over. And it should work, so let's see. So we noticed that we were getting that, and that's looking good. So we took the print statement out of this guy here, and now we're printing it in our Pokedex or Pokemon info controller. So we know that this Evo array has been set. Now we're going to just use this Evo array to populate these images here, and we will be pretty close to done. Then we just need to set our next evolution guide there. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay guys, so go ahead and just delete this loop here. We don't need it. We're going to say if let Evo array equals Pokemon.evo array. And what we need to do is check and see if what the count of this Evo array is. So essentially, if there's 2 Pokemon, we're going to be adding 2 images. If there's only 1, we're only going to be adding 1 image, right? So we're going to say if Evo array.count is greater than 1, then we're going to say first Evo imagery.image equals Evo array, and we're going to grab the 0 index.image, and then we're going to say second Evo imagery.image equals Evo array 1.image, and then here we can just go ahead and say else, and we're just going to copy and paste this line of code here. So let's go ahead and remove these background images or these background colors from our image views. So let's see, where are they? So just remove that and remove that. Go ahead and run that. And we should see our evolution chain showing up correctly now. So let's hit Charmander, and we see Charmeleon and Charizard, which is looking good. We do Bulbasaur, we see these 2 guys. Squirtle, we see Wartortle and Blastoise. So this is looking really good. Now, guys, I'm actually not going to do this next evolution guy here because it gets kind of complicated. So like if we go, the way we have our data set up, is that like, say we go to Dragonair, it gives us back the evolution chain. It doesn't necessarily just give us back the next evolution of a Pokemon. So like that's just how the data was structured from where I got it from. So we look at Venusaur and it gives us back the same evolution chain, right? It tells us what it evolved from, and then it gives us back this stuff like that. So it's just some stuff, like an issue with the data. It's not necessarily, I mean, we could program it to make it all perfect and stuff, but I think you guys have learned enough and gotten like the main gist and all the skills required of what this application was intended to teach you and help you learn. So there's just one more thing we need to do. So let's go ahead and just make this guy say evolution chain. Okay, and then we notice that if we were to click on a Pokemon who doesn't have an evolution chain, that it doesn't work at all. And that's because we are using this guard statement in our did select item and index pass. So we need to change this to an if let. So we need to say if let evo chain is equal to Pokemon.evolution chain, and just do your brackets there. Pass that in there, and then also, oops, pass that in there. And then we'll go up here and also pass this in here. So that's what this is going to look like now. So it's just going to say that if this evo chain exists, then do all this stuff and set that evo array value that we created in our Pokemon class right there. So then it shows the info controller with that Pokemon, and whether or not that Pokemon has an evolution array, it's going to show no matter what. So let's go ahead and run that and see if it works. And if it does, we are going to be all done. So fingers crossed. So let's hop down to Mew or Mewtwo, hit him, and that's looking really good. So I actually found one more bug, guys, and there are some Pokemon in here who evolve into a Pokemon that is not part of the original 151 Pokemon. So like if you were to click on Zubat, I think it is, or Golbat right here, your app would crash. So to fix that, all we need to do is hop up into our Pokemon class, and we only want to append the ID if it's less than 151. So we're going to say, cut that really quick. So we're going to say if ID is less than 151, less than or equal to, I guess we should say, then append it. So let's go ahead and run this code, and then we're going to be done. Pokedex, sick. All right, let's go ahead and click on this guy, and yes, it works. So that's looking good. So if you guys look here, you see that it evolves into Crobat, which is an ID 169. I guess that was added into like a new Pokemon version. So that would have caused a crash, but we fixed it and we're all good. So guys, I'm gonna do a quick recap of everything we did in the app, just for those of you who want like a quick summary. If you don't, we're done. So cool. That's our Pokedex, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hit subscribe, hit like, check out my Instagram course. The link's in the description if you haven't already. And for those of you sticking around, I'm going to go back over the app really quickly. So we started with this Pokedex controller, and we did all our model view controller stuff, right? So like we created an instance of this Pokemon array here, and then we fetched our Pokemon here using our data service. We implemented a bunch of completion blocks, and then we reload our collection view data. And then in order to get our Pokemon into our cells, we hopped into our collection view data source guy, and that's where we set up all of those Pokemon. And then we had to create this delegate method to introduce this long press functionality in order for that guy to pop up there. And that's because we have to present that view over top of our main controller. We can't do it from our cell. So if we hop into our Pokedex cell, we created this protocol, created this delegate variable, and then in the long press handler, we executed that delegate. We used that delegate method, and this code is written in our Pokedex controller right here, right? So that's all the code for that. It's written on our controller, and that keeps us within the model view controller framework, right? We want all of our code, or like action handlers and stuff like that, API calls, so on and so forth, to be handled in the controller. And everything else that involves the model and the view is done through connection of that controller, right? So then we implemented our searching. So we created this separate array for our filtered Pokemon, and we implemented this search bar here. And essentially what we did was we had to change our collection view around a little bit so that it got the right Pokemon from the right array, okay? And then we had this search bar delegate, let's go there, and we implemented this cancel button clicked, this where we configure our search bar, and then we had this texted change method, which gets called every time the user enters in some text, and it updates our data in real time, which is really cool. So we had this in search mode variable to determine whether or not we're in search mode, reloading our collection view data based on that stuff. And here's where we filtered our Pokemon. So essentially that's a quick wrap up, guys. Let me hop into our service really quick as well. And hold on, got a message. Okay. This is where we got all our Pokemon data from our API. So that was really cool. We did some parsing here, some looping through, set up, fetched an image, which we did here. So this is a really, really cool application, guys. I hope you learned a lot. It basically teaches you how to connect to a data source, import that information into your application, create a custom object out of that information. So in this case, it was a Pokemon, but it could be anything, really. Anything that has some sort of like attributes here where it's like a name, an image, height, weight, blah, blah, blah. It could be like video game characters. It could be one of a million things. Anything that you have attributes like that for, you are almost always going to want to create a custom object here and then add all those attributes to that custom object and then configure it sort of like we did here once you fetch your data from your API. Then it makes it, that enables us to do stuff like create a custom array of these custom objects and populate our collection view or table view or whatever it may be with that custom data. So that's something really common that you're going to see in developing mobile apps in general. This is like a really good fundamental structure that you're going to see a lot in developing mobile apps. Hey, go get me some data from an API and display it somehow in a collection view, a table view, or an info view, stuff like that. So I hope you guys learned a lot. Thanks for sticking around for this explanation. If you're still here, you're a real one. And that's going to be it for this video series, guys. I hope you're liking this info on the channel. And look out for some other video series I'm going to be coming out with, some other courses I'm going to be coming out with. I'm really excited about this channel. It's growing pretty quickly. I'm going to be releasing a lot more stuff. I'm going to be telling you guys a little bit about my background, where I come from, how I became a professional iOS developer, how you can do that too if that's what you're trying to do, what my salary is, and all that good stuff. So thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for sticking around. Hope you have a good one. Peace.